Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes. I am joined with Sako Gekchan, who we're just we've been having some fun chatting back and forth, um talking about just all kinds of stuff, but now it's time to get to business. So we are still in the, oh, I always forget, Ancient Paths TV, very ironically named, patristic roots of the Reformed faith. So we've covered about a little over an hour of his material. Um,
Let's
so
get down to
That's
business.
right. So we are in, and last time where we left off was, um, if you guys remember, I think this is actually really interesting because where we left off, he was talking about the fact that, and we kind of called him on the fact that his claim is that Saint Dionysius or Saint Denis, um, was getting his interpretations from pagan philosophy, but then
Yeah.
he cites a pagan philosopher from 200 years after Saint Denis. And so my kind of contention with that is why is it always assumed, no matter what the situation is, it's always assumed that the Christian is getting their information from some pagan? It can never be that the pagan, even if it's 200 years later than the
Yeah.
Christian, it can never be that the
Well,
pagan was influenced by the Christian.
yeah. Well, to be fair, he's sort of assuming that it wasn't really Saint Dionysius. So
That's true
that
too. He is making the assumption that it wasn't Saint Dionysius, but I guess my point is that it just
yeah.
seems like his whole argument is based on this tacit assumption that
Yeah.
Christians aren't allowed to have any ideas of our own, that we only borrow from pagans and butcher
Yeah,
whatever they're saying.
it's sort of this. Unfortunately, it's this sort of like de-philosophize this unwarranted de-philosophizing of the Bible. The
Right,
idea that like the Bible is pure, uh, poetry, history, and like maybe a bit of wisdom literature and prophecy. Like there is no philosophy. Any philosophy or philosophical speculation in the Bible is from the pagans. And
right,
you have groups of people pushing this nonsense. Uh, the first group are the atheists and skeptics who say, yeah, the Hebrews were a bunch of desert dwelling dum dums who didn't have any sort of philosophical speculation. Metaphysics was a civilized Greek thing, and it sort
right.
of comes from this sort of post Enlightenment bias of like everything good and intellectual came from the Hellenes. Um, so there's that side, and then the other side that pushes it are the what I call like the kind of dumb anti-intellectual Christians
Right.
who are like, yeah, all the philosophical metaphysical stuff did come from the Hellenes, and it's bad and demonic and pagan, and we should throw out
Exactly.
all the philosophy and metaphysics and just and just like read the Bible as is. Well, it's like, the funny thing is that not all, but a lot of the people who do who do that all the way through end up as open theists
Right.
because they end up reading the Bible hyper literally, which is funny because you can never read hyper literally because if you do that, you're going to be riddled with contradictions. But they try to read the Bible hyper literally, and so they read when there's language of God supposedly changing his mind, and they say, yes, take that literally. God literally changed his mind. He is in time.
Right.
So
Exactly.
so all of this is sort of part of a like and like I would ask like now I don't know where the guy on Ancient Past TV falls. He's a Calvinist, and Calvinists funny enough, are actually at least some of the very old school Calvinists I've seen are very scholastic. So they actually do get deep into philosophy and metaphysics. So I would have to ask them, it's like, what? So then, what's your aversion to philosophy?
Right.
If your problem is that you think the writings of Dionysius are too Platonic, read them again. They're not very Platonic at all. Actually, I've read them.
Right.
I I
I
have his
mean, but
work.
that's the thing though, is this guy has probably never studied Platonism to even know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
he's talking about. Like, this is one of the problems I have as kind of a pet peeve, I'll admit, is that I see these things where Protestants will say, "Ah, see, look, this is some kind of pagan philosophy. This is some kind of Gnostic philosophy." But then you ask them, like, "Okay, have you ever studied Gnosticism?" Well, no. Have you ever studied paganism? Well, no. Have you ever studied Platonism? Well, no. Then how do you even know that that's what it is?
yeah, yeah. It's like I've read the Gnostic Gospels. I have the whole like in my library on my phone. I have the Nag Hammadi collection,
Yeah,
uh, complete with the Gospel of Thomas. So I know what Gnostic looks like when I see it. I have the
exactly.
I have the Manichaean texts. I have as far as the philosophy, like the Greek philosophy, I have I have the works of Aristotle. I have the works of Plato, and then I have several Neoplatonists as well. So I've gone pretty deep into Plotinus, Proclus, and Iamblichus. So I know what Neoplatonism looks like.
Right. Exactly. Which is why you know that Saint Dionysius, or what a lot of scholars erroneously call pseudo Dionysius, is not Neoplatonism at all.
Yeah.
Um,
And even if like and like I said, I'm as far as the identity of the authorship, I'm when I find time, I do want to go down the arguments for both sides. I'm honestly open to both sides.
yeah, I'm
But
pretty
even but even if
open-minded.
but even if it wasn't Saint Dionysius himself, but somebody writing in his honor, let's say it was, as some people say, like a fifth century or sixth century monk. Who cares? It's still I've read his works. It's still not Neoplatonism.
Right. I do remember though that the book does address some things that were contemporary. So it has to at least be referencing some kind of
Yeah,
tradition that some of the tradition in that book has to go back to Dionysius because if it
yeah,
because otherwise how would somebody in the 5th century have even known what was going on in Athens in the second
right.
century or whatever it is. Anyway,
Yeah,
we can
and
go ahead and
one thing I will say about his writings, because it is off
yeah,
topic with what we're discussing,
yeah,
it does use some Platonizing language in terms of like sort of the levels of reality or whatever as
right,
a you know, as and it does speak of God in terms of like divine mind or divine intellect, but again the important thing is framing versus
right,
ver- definition. Like he uses Platonic language to frame like things like in terms of the mind of God and all this stuff, but he makes but that you have to take into account what's the audience he was communicating with.
right,
Greeks. So
exactly,
in the same way, like if I was you know preaching to Hindus, um, I would be using Indian religious language to describe the Holy Trinity, to describe whatever.
exactly,
It's language that's familiar to them. So and that's the way the ancient like that's just what happens when you have an exchange of ideas. Um,
exactly,
Different schools of thought, including rival schools of thought, will sometimes pass vocabulary between each other because they're sort of swimming in the same intellectual pools.
right.
Like
Well, and also you have to like one of the things that you have to be able to do in order to convince someone is you have to be able to kind of speak their language. Um, like nobody is going to find an atheist is not going to find like my particular phrasing of Orthodox Christianity convincing if I jump straight into you know, I believe that fairies are real and all this stuff. Like he's just not he's gonna be weirded out by that
Yeah.
unless I start by explaining it in some way that he can actually fathom.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like if I'm communicating with an atheist, the strategy I found effective in the past is before I even get into discussions about God, I address the assumption of materialism head
right,
on and sort of
exactly.
force them to confront the very notion that matter in an ultimate sense even exists.
Right,
And back them into a corner with that, and then sort of demonstrate that, okay, to use Aristotle's language, there's matter and form, right? But
right,
matter, if matter is basically just energy, right, in a different like in a different form, so to speak, then an energy is just the is literally the capacity to do work. Like it's not a thing. Then we know that information is a thing. So
right.
having sort of dismantled the ultimateness of matter, what's left? Information. Okay, where does the information emerge from? See where I'm going? Like,
Yeah,
so I have to like lead them down that rabbit hole. So you have different audiences.
exactly. So because of that, I actually don't have a problem with if Saint Dionysius or if we're saying that somebody else wrote it, then fine, whoever wrote it. I have no problem with them using sort of
Yeah,
pagan language to describe the faith so that they can witness to the faith.
and
Um,
and and to the audience, the time at which both Saint Paul and Saint Dionysius would have been living, um, was the period of Platonic philosophy known as Middle Platonism. Um, and one of the popular ideas at that time was that um, basically the forms or the ideas were found in the mind of God, which was
mhm,
sort of a development from Plato, because in Plato's thought there was the idea of the good, which is funny because the good was sort of an idea, um,
right,
like I don't think it was like even the ultimate idea, right? But it was sort of maybe the idea of ideas, or
right,
or at least the highest among the ideas. I have to. It's been a while since I read Plato. I'm more familiar with the Neoplatonists. But by the time you get to like Alcinous and Philo of Alexandria, you have you have the this idea that no, these forms aren't just these eternal concepts. Like there's a eternal idea of triangularity floating in this like Platonic mathematical heaven that the
right,
demiurge has to look at, because I think people started to realize like that makes no sense. How would that even work?
right,
like like how how does the idea of triangularity exist apart from a mind to conceive of the idea or the form?
right,
So they correctly, I would argue, came to the idea that triangularity, circularity, gravity, whatever you want to call it, like even like modern ideas like gravity, these are all ideas in the divine intellect, in the mind of the divine, the mind of God.
right,
So that's the sort of language that is contemporary with Saint Paul, and that's the language that that Saint Dionysius would have been familiar with and would have communicated with to the sort of intelligentsia of Athens that he was trying to reach.
exactly.
Okay, so yeah, that's our background. We can move forward now.
Perfect.
who had died 4 centuries after Dionysius. There was no chance earlier writings had
By the way,
simply
the
been
screen isn't showing
misattributed.
up.
What's that?
The YouTube screen isn't showing up for me.
It's not showing up for you? Okay, hold on a second. Let me let me
Mhm.
share screen.
I heard the audio, just not the picture.
Okay. How about now?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is.
Perfect.
To an earlier saint, because the writings specifically claimed to be from Paul's convert. Most importantly, Lorenzo Valla discovered that before the 6th century, there's no evidence anyone had ever heard of these writings.
Oh,
Given that they
now
were
it's
over
like.
twice as long,
Oh, there we go.
Um,
There it is.
so he just said that prior to the 6th century, there was no evidence that anyone had ever heard of the writings of Saint Dionysius. Um, the problem with that claim is that I've literally read early church fathers who are quoting Saint Dionysius, um, saying various things. Now, some of those are things that are not in the Dionysian books, but some of them, or the book of Saint Dionysius, but some of them are things that are. So I think you could argue that, like, at least the things that are could either be examples where they got it from these, or at the very least, that all of these things point us to a tradition that is from Saint Dionysius. But I've definitely read lots of church fathers who are quoting Saint Dionysius, and some of them are before the 6th century. So that's just, I mean, I don't understand why this guy just makes claims, seemingly just to make claims. Like, I don't know. That's just bad. Do you have wasn't really thinking about it though, so I don't have like a specific example other than I'm reasonably sure that I've read something about a quote from Saint Dionysius in Saint Athanasius, um, who's in the 4th century. So, Sako, did you have anything to add to that? Let me see. Hold on one second. Okay, we're back. We're back. Sako's back. Um,
So
yeah,
the
go ahead.
the internet here has been a little spotty lately.
Oh, okay. So that's why. Yeah,
Maybe
all of a sudden you weren't there, and I was like, Sako? Sako?
dun,
Um, but
dun,
yeah.
dun.
All right, well, I'll just continue playing then. I haven't gotten any further than I did, so you're still up to speed.
as the Apostle Paul's, their being completely unknown cast serious doubt on their authenticity. Some accuse Protestants of adopting the hyper-skepticism of unbelievers, through which even the Bible becomes doubted. But the reality is that we're just following the standard of Irenaeus. Like the Gnostic Gospels, the writings of Dionysius are
Okay, so he says we're just following the standard of Irenaeus. Well, if you're following the standard of Irenaeus, then first of all, you're not because Irenaeus accepted these things. So claiming, so you are doing the hyper-skepticism of liberal scholars. In fact, it was 19th century German scholarship that came up with that radical liberalism from within Protestantism that even
Yeah,
questioned the scriptures themselves. So that is what Protestants are doing when they do these things. I don't know what else to say to that.
yeah, and I don't really see a lot of Protestants appealing to Irenaeus. I'm sorry. They basically just say scripture, sola scriptura, sola scriptura, sola scriptura. Like, um,
Exactly. The idea
and
that
and and
you're
and, and
like,
the, when you do bring up like certain church traditions, they really do approach it with the sort of like hyper skepticism that atheists
right,
would approach everything in the faith. Um, so it's like, so I was like confront them on it. I'm like, are you basically do you only basically just accept the scriptures because you're required to? Like,
right,
it's like, oh,
exactly,
we have to, like, it's almost like they want to be hyper skeptical, but at the same time they want to be a faithful Christian. So they sort of turn it off for the Bible and be like,
right,
okay, we have um we have to do it, we have to be unquestioning about the Bible. But all this other stuff that's weird and we don't like it, we can be as atheistic and like hyper skeptical as we want. Like this, the church tradition is our outlet for our enlightenment thinking. I guess like
exactly. That's exactly what it's like. And the thing is, too, is that I don't know, this just seems it's just very disingenuous to say we're just using Saint Ignatius's argument about being apostolic, but you're not actually, because Saint Ignatius, his argument isn't rooted in sola scriptura. His argument is rooted in the idea that because we have this unbroken apostolic tradition, we can know what is apostolic. But you're saying, this guy is saying that the
yeah,
church can be wrong about what's apostolic, and so we need sola scriptura. So he's actually doing the opposite of Saint Irenaeus's, or Saint Ignatius's, whoever he just quoted. Um,
he said Irenaeus. So
yeah, so he's doing the
so
opposite of what Irenaeus was saying to do in the text that we saw before that he was quoting.
yeah, I'm trying to remember. Later on we can go back and see the text he was quoting because I can't remember even what Irenaeus was saying in the text he was quoting.
It's the one where he says that, ironically, it's the one where he says that because the church has this unbroken succession, she can know where Irenaeus is refuting the Gnostics, and he
Mm-hmm.
says that since the church has this unbroken succession, unlike the Gnostics, she can actually prove that what
Mm-hmm.
she's saying comes from the apostles and therefore from Christ.
Yeah,
And so he's quoting that, but he's quoting it to try to say that, well, we can reject all the writings of the fathers because we're using Ignatius's or Irenaeus's argument. But if you were using Irenaeus's argument, then it's the fathers themselves who you need in order to know what is apostolic. You're getting
yeah,
that from the fathers. So to
yeah,
reject the fathers on that basis doesn't make any sense.
yeah, exactly. All right.
Simply too late to have been authentic, and their 9 spiritual hierarchies sound a lot more like Gnosticism than anything in the New Testament. As shown in another
What?
video on this channel,
Gnosticism doesn't talk about nine spiritual hierarchies.
I th- no, it doesn't. And I guarantee you, this is what I was saying before. I guarantee you this guy has never studied Gnosticism. The closest thing to 9 spiritual hierarchies in Gnosticism is their doctrine of the octoad, which is not 9, it's 8, and it's not spiritual hierarchies, but it's 8 beings that derive their sort of essence from the
Yeah,
one.
yeah, then
Um,
and then yeah, like I think it's like pairs of gods and goddesses that come together to create things, and they are
right,
emanations from the one or whatever.
exactly. But I mean, like I said, I highly doubt that he's even studied Gnosticism enough to know about that. He's just saying that because somebody said this book is Gnostic, so now he's saying that it's Gnostic, but he's
Yeah,
never actually researched it in all likelihood. Um,
Yeah.
But like again, on the off chance that this guy has ever researched Gnosticism, the only thing I can even imagine that he could be referring to with that would be the octoad, which again is not nine, it's eight, and it's not spiritual hierarchies either. So that's totally absurd. Gnosticism
Yeah.
doesn't even have that.
Yeah, and hierarchies in the Dionysian works is talking about the types of angels, powers, principalities, thrones,
Exactly.
dominions. That's very biblical.
Exactly. Yeah, it's biblical. So, oh, this guy just says things.
Get it?
Well,
You gotta
counterfeit
you gotta say it like a mafia boss. This guy.
This guy just says things just to say things.
didn't stop with the early Gnostics. The Proto-Evangelium of James and the Acts of Paul and Thecla were very popular, despite being denounced as frauds.
They were not denounced as frauds. Oh my goodness. The acts of Paul and Thecla are not Gnostic, dude. You're just like I guarantee you this guy has never read the Acts of Paul and Thecla or Proto-Evangelium
Wait, did
of
he say
James.
they were Gnostic though? Go back a little bit. I want to make sure we're understanding him properly.
Where's my little
Well, yeah, do the arrow thing. Do the arrow thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the arrow. Where's the little arrow thing? Hold up.
Oh, just arrows on your keyboard, man.
Oh, right. Right. I remember that now.
Yeah, that's like a
Before
very
the Acts of
short
Paul and
rewind.
Thecla were really Gnostics.
A little more.
The
Do a
Proto-Evangelium
couple
of
like.
James and the Acts in the New Testament.
Mhm.
As shown in another video on this channel, counterfeits didn't stop with the early Gnostics. The
Oh, I see.
Proto-Evangelium of James and the Acts of Paul and Thecla were very popular, despite being denounced as frauds before the year 210. Tertullian not only rejected the Proto-Evangelium's claim to Jesus dematerializing and rematerializing.
It doesn't say he dematerialized and rematerialized. It does not say that.
In fact, you know what? Let me let me send it to you. There's a PDF of it. Let me send it to you. We could probably like go look it up real quick, like the passage.
Yeah, because it doesn't say that he dematerialized and rematerialized. And also, who cares what Tertullian thinks? Tertullian was a
It,
heretic who left the church.
it, and even before he left the church, he had some wonky ideas.
Yeah. You, Tertullian had all kinds of ideas that I guarantee you. In fact, since this guy wants to quote Tertullian, Tertullian believed that baptism and only baptism could remit sins, and therefore sins committed after baptism could never be forgiven, which is why Tertullian said that it was better for people to wait until they were old to get baptized, because otherwise, if you committed sins after your baptism, then those sins could never be forgiven. That's something Tertullian says. I guarantee you, this reformed po' boy does not think that Tertullian was right about that, but he apparently thinks
Yeah,
Tertullian was right about the Proto-Evangelium of James. Inexplicably. Inexplicably.
I I
Um,
I sent you the PDF file.
yeah, let
So
me pull that
that's
up here.
luckily it's only 10 pages long. The Proto Evangelium is very short.
Nice.
So
The
so
Proto-Evangelium of James. I love the Proto-Evangelium of James in part just
yeah
because Protestants hate it. Like the
yeah
fact that Protestants hate it makes me love it.
yeah yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Do you happen to know where the part is about the birth of Christ that he's talking about, or do you want me to just read like
Okay, okay, skip like maybe 5 pages in and see like read the first few lines just to yourself. You don't have to read it out loud. Just to sort of gauge how close you are to the birth.
Sure.
or maybe like good 6, 7 pages in. I'm guessing it's going to be closer to the end.
Yeah. I don't remember where it is in the. It's been a long time since I've read the Proto-Evangelium.
Yeah, since it covers like Mary's childhood,
Right.
I'm guessing the birth is going to be closer to the end.
Okay. Magi saying to them. No, that's about Herod.
Okay, so too far.
Yeah, I went too far. Okay. Uh, Here we go. And I saw a woman crying from the hill country, and she said to me, O man, whither art thou going? And I said, I am seeking an Hebrew midwife. And she answered and said to me, Are you of Israel? And I said to her, Yes. And she said, And who is it that is bringing forth in the cave? And I said, A woman betrothed to me. And she said, is she not your wife? And I said to her, It is Mary, she who was reared in the temple of the Lord, and I obtained her by lot as my wife. And she is not my wife, but has conceived of the Holy Spirit. And the midwife said to him, Is this true? And Joseph said to her, Come and see. And the midwife went away with him and stood in the place of the cave. And behold, a luminous cloud overshadowed the cave. And the midwife said, My soul has been magnified this day, because mine eyes have seen strange things, and salvation has been brought forth to Israel. And immediately the cloud appeared out of the cave, and a great light shone in the cave, so that the eyes could not bear it. And in a little light gradually decreased until the infant appeared, and went and took the breast of his mother Mary. And the midwife cried out and said, This is a great day to me, because I have seen this strange light. And the midwife went forth in the cave, and Salome met her. And she said to her, Salome, Salome, I have seen a strange sight related to you. A virgin has brought forth a thing for which nature admits not of. And then Salome said, As the Lord my God lives, unless I trust in my finger and search the parts, I will not believe that a virgin has brought forth.
Oh, okay, we don't have to go into that part. I know that part.
Yeah, so I know that part too. What happens is that then they basically make sure that, not to get too graphic, but they make sure that she is in fact a virgin, and they see that um, that she's still intact. So that's what he's claiming, that what that means, because see, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you something, Sako, that he is not admitting here, which is
Hmm.
I don't just know why he says that. I know who he's getting it from. He's getting that idea from Dr. James White. Because Dr. James White, unlike this guy, Dr. James White has actually read the Proto-Evangelium of James and made a joke on his podcast that the Proto-Evangelium of James was really dumb because of this scene. And he says it I mean, I'm sorry, I can't get I can't keep dodging it. I'm just gonna have to say it outright.
Yeah.
Basically, Dr. James White says the fact that the Proto-Evangelium of James describes the Theotokos' hymen as being still intact means that the only way that she could have given birth would have been to quote James White, quote unquote, Star Trek, wow. That's what he does. He says Star Trek and then he does a sound effect. And this guy, because he hasn't actually read the Proto Evangelium of James, listened to that Dr. James White thing, and now he's making a video claiming that that's what the Proto-Evangelium of James actually teaches, because he hasn't read it, so he doesn't know that Dr. James White was joking. Now, Dr. James White is wrong, and he's mocking our Christian tradition because he's wrong. But Dr. James White at least has the intellectual honesty to just admit that he's making a joke, whereas this guy honestly thinks that that joke is what's going on in the text.
Yeah. Now, yeah, just to hammer it home, read that part about the cloud again, because there's something that I feel like that is being missed here. Check this out. Like
Get it
where
back up.
she arrives at the cave, and then there's a cloud overshadowing the cave and all that.
Right. Yeah, let me
Yeah,
just
go.
get it
Yeah,
back
read
up.
that part.
Let me just get it back to where I had it.
Mhm.
Here we go. And I saw a woman coming down from the hill country, and she said to me, "O man, whither
Oh,
art thou going?"
yeah, you can go a little far, like go to where they get back to the cave.
Oh, I see. And the midwife said to him, "Is this true?" And Joseph said to her, "Come and see." And the midwife went with him, and they stood in the place of the cave. And behold, a luminous cloud overshadowed the cave. And the midwife said, "My soul has been magnified this day because my eyes have seen strange things, because
Mhm.
salvation has been brought forth in Israel." And immediately the cloud disappeared out of the cave, and a great light shone in the cave, so that the eyes could not bear it. And in a little that light gradually decreased until the infant appeared.
Okay, you catch the subtlety there? I can say it, but I don't know if you caught it.
Well, go ahead, say it.
Okay, so they're they're trying to make it sound like there's like Jesus, like Mary was just sitting there, and then there's like a flash of light, and Jesus like appeared as that light, and then the light like turned into Jesus or something. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
like you're saying, like sort of like a Star Trek or whatever.
right,
Um, that's not what happens. There's a great luminous light, and then the
right,
light dissipates, right? And as the light dissipates, Jesus appears.
right.
Like there's Jesus. Just like you have like a cloud of smoke, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then as the smoke disappears, you see me standing there. It's
Right,
not like it's not like the smoke disappears, or it's not like the light disappeared and faded away, and then Jesus just poof, like poofed into existence or whatever.
right,
There was a light, and the light was very bright. Presumably you can't really see through the light because it's so bright, right? But then the light disappears, and when it disappears, it reveals Jesus there. Like,
right. It's
so
not that
who
the
knows?
light turned into Jesus, it's that there was the bright light basically obscuring the birth.
Yeah, yeah. So who knows what happened in that light?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's a mystery.
Yeah. So, so this whole thing about him dematerializing or whatever, and
Right.
and and I love the hyper skepticism. Like, in order for that to be possible, Jesus would have had to Star Trek whatever. That's like me saying, uh, uh, feeding thousand, turning a loaf of bread and two fish into thousands of loaves and thousands of fish. In order for that to be possible, the particles in the fish would have had to multiply exponentially by the factor of. You
Exactly.
you see how stupid that sounds?
Right, exactly. No, it's impossible. Right. That's why it's called a miracle.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if you're gonna argue against the text, argue against it like in terms of doctrines, argue against it in terms of antiquity or authorship or authority. Fine, we can have those conversations.
Right.
But to like make fun of it because, oh, there's a flash of light and then Jesus was there. Uh, yeah, he's God.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like you just uh
I,
yeah,
I don't know if you could. I don't know how it looks on your end. Like, can you see me on your end of the screen?
I can.
Okay. In that case,
Face palm. Exactly. All right, let me get
that it makes me want to quote that meme.
Yes.
Stop it. Get some help.
Stop. Get some help. Oh, that's
All right,
awesome.
keep going.
so as to leave Mary's virginity intact. But he tells us,
If the writings, which wrongly go under Paul's name, claim Thekla's example as a license for women's teaching and baptizing, let them know that, in Asia, the presbyter who composed that writing, after being convicted and confessing that he had done it, was removed from his office.
despite this and a host of other issues, Eastern Orthodox treat the Proto-Evangelium as real history.
So I like how this guy jumps from the Proto-Evangelium to Paul and Thecla and then says, "See, look, Tertullian, who by the way was a heretic, but Tertullian rejects Paul and Thecla, so therefore you should reject the Proto-Evangelium of James." Did you see how he just did that? It was
Yeah, that's a nice little sleight of hands there, buddy. Like, that's nice
He's
little
like,
sleight of hand.
despite the fact that Tertullian rejects Paul and Thecla, and
Yeah.
by the way, Tertullian has no authority for us anyway, but also, Paul and Thecla, so this is kind of interesting because, Sako, do you know why Paul and Thecla talks about women baptizing?
Uh, I can't remember.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting because it actually speaks to the authenticity of Paul and Thecla. So in the very, very early church, there was a thing called deaconesses. And a
Oh, okay,
lot
okay, yes, yes, yes. I
and a
know where
lot
this
of
is going.
people think that that means that they were deacons who were women, but that's actually not true. The reason why the early church had something called deaconesses is because in the very, very earliest days of the church, people would get baptized naked. And so, well, there would be a priest officiating the baptismal service. For women, they would have women to basically perform the actual act of baptism so that women didn't have to be naked in front of a man. Um,
Yeah.
so that's why the Acts of Paul and Thecla talks about women baptizing is
Hmm.
actually because the Acts of Paul and Thecla comes from such an early point in the church that they still had women doing this. Now, there is one scene in the Acts of Paul and Thecla that you could argue is kind of problematic, where Thecla is about to be martyred and she hasn't been baptized yet because she hasn't been allowed um, to be baptized yet by the people in her community. They've prevented it. And so because she's in this desperate situation, she basically throws herself into the water and says that she's doing it so that she can receive baptism before she dies. That's the only problematic scene because obviously baptizing yourself is invalid, but I would note that the text of the Acts of Paul and Thecla does not say that this was a valid baptism. It just relates the fact that Thecla did this act because she was so desperate to receive baptism.
Yeah.
Um, so like I'm not saying that that is a
Yeah.
good thing for someone to do, but I'm saying that that's a far cry from describing like this as something that's okay to do
Right.
within the text.
And I'm not sure how authoritative Paul and Thecla is for you guys, but like for us at least, it's really not that much on our radar.
No,
So
it's actually so the Acts of Paul and Thecla is not some authoritative text. The only reason why the Acts of Paul and Thecla is important is because it relates a lot of the traditions about the life of Saint Paul after the book of Acts. So, and Thecla was a real person. She was a real martyr from the early church. So it relates
right,
the story of her life as well. And so that's why
yeah.
it's important. But it's not some authoritative text. There's essentially nothing in the Acts of Paul and Thecla that is actually doctrinal or anything like that. It's like the book of Acts of the Apostles. It's a historiography of the early church.
So how authoritative is the proto-evangelium for you guys? Because um like he's making it sound like it's like uber authoritative. I mean like we obviously believe it's true, like the
Right,
events described therein are true. The the Theotokos living on the in the precinct of the temple and her perpetual virginity and all that, but like obviously it's not at the same level of scripture, but
right.
it's part of the memory of the church.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that's
So
weird to me is when Protestants start saying like, "Oh, it's so crazy," the Orthodox quote the Proto-Evangelium of James. What's weird to me is the Proto-Evangelium of James has literally no authority within Orthodoxy. The only reason we quote it is because it's a very early document that happens to relate oral traditions that really were authentic oral traditions. So
yeah,
we actually have preserved um, in the life of the church all of the things that are in the Proto-Evangelium of James that matter, like you said, the fact that the Theotokos was raised in the temple, the fact that she was a temple virgin, the fact that she was betrothed to Joseph. All of these things have been preserved in the liturgy of the church. We don't actually need the
yeah,
Proto-Evangelium of James, so it has no authority. We basically use it for confirmation because it's an early text that's basically confirming that you can see that even in the early days of the church, people already knew about this stuff that we've preserved. That's the only way we really use it. It's not
hmm
something that, so I've always found it strange when I see Protestants doing this and they think that they're somehow like refuting orthodoxy because they
hmm
try to prove that the Proto-Evangelium of James isn't valid or whatever their issue is
yeah,
with it. But it's always odd to me because it's like, well, that would be like if I said, Protestantism is stupid because, look, C.S. Lewis says this one thing in one of his books, and that's wrong. Like, okay, like, yeah, everybody loves C.S. Lewis, but he's not some authoritative figure in like, it's not like the Protestant Bible has C.S. Lewis in it. So
yeah,
it's just very odd. It would just be a very odd way of going about trying to refute Protestantism to be like,
yeah,
well, or even to say, Protestantism is wrong because, look, John Calvin says this weird thing and no Protestants actually believe that thing, but John Calvin
right,
says it. So, haha, checkmate, Protestants. Like, it,
yeah,
Protestants would just look at you funny and be like, well, who cares? Like, that's not really what any Protestant church teaches. And in a similar way, it's not the same because I suppose you could argue that we do believe that the Proto-Evangelium of James is relating real traditions, but we've preserved those traditions outside of the Proto-Evangelium of James. So it's not
yeah,
like I think Protestants like this guy are under the misconception that
Mhm.
we are relying on the proto-evangelium of James, like that we're saying this is true because it's in the proto-evangelium, but that's
Mhm.
not what we're saying. So I've always found this to be a strange
Yeah.
argument. Like when I was a Protestant and I was first inquiring and then a catechumen into Orthodoxy, I was quite literally the only person in my my catechism class who had ever even heard of the Proto-Evangelium of James, and it
Right.
never came up in catechism class. It's not like it was something that we used to teach catechism. It was like I happened to talk the to Father Michael one day outside of the class, like I was meeting with him, and I was like, "Hey, is the Proto-Evangelium of James legitimate? Because I've read this, and it has a lot of the information that we were talking about." And he basically said something to the effect of like, "Yeah, I mean, it's useful if you want to read it or something." But like even then, like so even when I asked him about it directly, he basically just said, "Yeah, read it if you want to." But there was no sense of like, "Oh yeah, you need to read that text because it contains the truth of whatever." No, because
Yeah.
at no point did we need the Proto-Evangelium of James to prove anything. So I just find it very odd when Protestants go about this, because, like you just said,
Mhm.
your question was a very valid question of, like, how much authority does this even hold? And the answer is pretty much none. It's basically just another witness to
Mhm.
what we already know from oral tradition.
Yeah. There you go. All right, moving on.
But I just want to reiterate that it's hilarious to me that his argument is Tertullian rejects Paul and Thecla, therefore you should reject the Proto-Evangelium of James, therefore you should reject the Orthodox Church. Like, there's so many bizarre, like, leaps of
Leaps that
logic
of
here
yeah.
that don't make any
Yeah,
sense.
again, like okay, let's see if he play it. Let's see if he quotes any of the supposed rejections of the proto evangelium. Because and then one day we got to figure out which one of his other videos on the channel, because he, as you mentioned, uh, in other videos on the channel, like he's mentioned that both of these were rejected as frauds by like 280 or something,
Right.
or so. So yeah, let's see what he says.
Thecla as equal to the apostles. These counterfeit writings of Dionysius.
So, just to clarify that really quick, lots of saints throughout history have been called equal to the apostles because of their great missionary work. Saint Nino equal to the apostles. Saint Patrick is called the apostle to the Irish. Um, Saint Tikhon is called the apostle to North America. Um, so lots of saints throughout history have been called equal to the apostles. It's not just Thecla. That's simply a reference to her great missionary endeavors, but I'll just leave that at that.
Yeah.
Has
Oh
helped
yeah. Also,
demonstrate the
also,
fallibility of the Church.
Yeah.
also um, the tomb of Saint Nino is on my pilgrimage list, and that's not going to be a hard pilgrimage to make because guess where she's buried?
Where?
In Georgia.
Oh, well, I guess of course. Like, yeah.
Yep. It's yep. It's literally a 5 hour bus ride from me.
Dang, bro. Take pictures.
Yes.
Take pictures. I want to see that so bad. She's like one of my heroes. So,
I will light a candle there on your behalf.
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Church, even in ecumenical councils. The Second Council of Nicaea cited them as demonstrating that the Holy Spirit was divinely leading them in refuting the arguments of the Council of Hieria.
The essence of our hierarchy lies in the divinely delivered maxims, namely, the true understanding of the sacred scriptures, as the great Dionysius says.
Second Nicaea was less than half the size of Hieria, but since it had more patriarchs, that was supposed to ensure that it was infallible. But the patriarch's office didn't keep them from confusing a 6th century counterfeit with real history. And it's not that...
Well, again, you claiming something is a counterfeit doesn't make it so. I could just as easily say that since the God-inspired council fathers say that this is a book worthy of citing, that means that it is. You could also make an argument that they weren't quoting from a text, but that they were quoting from oral tradition, which is also possible. I don't actually know the extent of that. I also don't care what Hyoria says because that was a local council that was refuted by Second Nicaea. Second Nicaea is an ecumenical council, and the size of the council is not what determines that it's an ecumenical council. Nicaea, First Nicaea, which is accepted by pretty much all Protestants, also was not a large council.
When it came
So,
to these councils, was it both bishops and presbyters in attendance, or just bishops?
um, sometimes both bishops and presbyters. Well, actually, at First Nicaea, there was even deacons present because Saint Athanasius was a deacon who was
Mm,
present at, when he was a deacon, he was present at, the Council of Nicaea.
yeah, so
And
I
that's
have
one
to
of the
wonder.
reasons why he knew that, like, later on when he was in exile, he was like, "You're exiling me for stuff that was said in the Council of Nicaea." And they were like, "How do you know?" And he said, "Because I was there."
Oh, yeah. Uh,
Anyway, yeah.
yeah, I was asking because when I hear like some Calvinists point to Hieria and say like talk about how big it is, I have to wonder like, okay, okay, maybe it had a lot of people, but how many people of rank? Like, was
Right.
it just a bunch of deacons and local priests, or was it a bunch of bishops? Like,
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have hardly any. If they might have had like one patriarch there, namely the Patriarch of Rome, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've never really like thoroughly studied Hieria to know for sure, but I'm pretty
yeah,
sure that I remember that it was an exclusively Western council,
yeah.
so not ecumenical council by any means. A better argument, though I would reject it, a better argument would be the false council of Ferrara Florence. Um, I've heard people try to argue that that should be considered an Westerners try to argue that that should be considered an ecumenical council, because there were Eastern bishops in attendance, and the East has canonized Saint Mark of Ephesus for refuting that council. But um but yeah, I would argue that that's not an ecumenical council because it's a false council, but that
Mm-hmm,
is a better you have a stronger argument with that one than
mm-hmm,
you do Hieria. Um but ironically, if you're trying to argue that Hieria is an ecumenical council, then guess who you need to affirm in order to do that? That this guy I guarantee you would not want to affirm.
the Pope.
Exactly. You need the Pope. You need to be able to say that the Bishop of Rome is the head of all of Christendom. If you're not willing to affirm that, then you can't say that Hieria or Ferrara Florence are ecumenical councils. So whenever Protestants try to play this game, it just makes them look ridiculous. You also kind of need to affirm that, what's his name? The Charlemagne. You basically need to affirm that Charlemagne was legitimate as like the new Holy Roman Empire, which I don't even think Protestants have a category for.
Mm,
So, like, why are you resting on the idea of hieria when it doesn't even fit your own church's narrative?
yeah.
Um, you're like shooting yourself in the foot here, guy.
I'm trying to wonder. I'm trying to remember if Hieria rejected the veneration of icons, or if it blanket rejected any images at all.
I I don't know. I actually don't know. Probably blanket rejected any images at all because otherwise why would reformed people use it?
Right.
Um, because I mean otherwise
What's
they're
the
kind of
real quick? What's the usual reformed response um to our argument where we point out the abundance of images in the tabernacle and the temple?
so reformed people will do one of two things. Reformed people who have actually studied church history will try to say that images in and of themselves are okay, but only the veneration of images is wrong. Um, and so so basically they'll try to reject the idea that the veneration of the image passes to that the type passes to the prototype. They'll try to reject that, and they'll basically say that that was a later development, which they
Okay.
basically argue by. But ones who haven't studied church history and have only
Yeah.
studied Reformed dogma,
Mhm.
they will straight up say um, that the people in the early church were just in sin.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, the Reformed people are totally willing to believe that the early church got everything wrong except the canon of scripture. I mean, I
That's
shouldn't say
that,
that. I shouldn't say
that's
that as
insane.
such a blanket statement. Lots of Reformed people are perfectly willing to say that. There are fortunately some Reformed people
Yeah.
who rightly see that that's a really problematic approach.
Yeah, you know what? Let me tell you this to any reform people who are listening who are of that more extreme persuasion. Guess what? If I was a Jew, I would love you guys.
Right?
Because guess what? Much like the church that believed in apostolic continuity, the Jews believed uh in Mosaic continuity and all that.
Right.
Like, so if I was a Jew, I would be laughing at Calvinist, like more extreme Calvinist Protestants, because I would be like ha ha ha, you you want us Jews and Muslims and other non Christians to believe you, but at the same time you're telling us uh, that very soon after the death of your apostles, the church slid into such grave errors that it took the Reformation like 1600 years later to to restore it to its former glory. That's a long period of apostasy right there.
Right.
So like it's almost as bad as Mormonism. It's almost as bad as
It
like
is.
our guy came through and fixed everything up. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Like
for sure.
it's
This is
not
why
as bad.
I This
It's
is
not
why
like
I came to reject Protestantism was because I figured out that it basically all Protestantism basically comes down to that same restorationist bent. Even if you are like a Lutheran who mocks restorationism and thinks it's stupid, you still ultimately have to believe some form of restorationism in order to be Lutheran because you have to believe that
mm,
pretty much from the very earliest times of the church, they stopped being Lutheran at some point and then started being Orthodox, but you don't want to be Orthodox, so you have to like
mm-hmm.
they'll try to hearken to some super early thing that they can't really reproduce, and then they'll say, "See, look, they didn't have images." And then you ask them like, "How do you know?" Well, because they didn't write about having images. And it's like, well, that doesn't really mean they didn't. It just means that nobody challenged them on it at that time, because it's not like people
Yeah,
were writing stuff. We've talked about that though before.
right. Yeah, like the early centuries of the church were full of persecution. So how much would really survive those days? I mean, it's a
Hmm.
miracle we have as much as we do.
It is. It is. But like
Um,
a lot of it isn't going to be there.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, um, and I had to point out to people like, think of the standards here. Okay, secular scholars who are not part. I'll give you an example from my former faith, from the Hindu tradition, right? When it comes to the Bhagavad Gita, a lot of secular scholars believe it is pre-Buddhistic.
Hmm.
That most of the Bhagavad Gita is prior to Buddhism. Why? Because uh, uh, it mentions all these other schools of thought. It mentions the Samkhya school, which is like the earliest school of Indian philosophy. It mentions the different schools of yoga. It mentions the tradition of Jainism, but it doesn't mention Buddhism. Buddhism is like the one main school that's conspicuous in its absence.
Hmm.
So there are certain things that they now the earliest manuscripts of the Bhagavad Gita in India go back to the Middle Ages, but secular, non-religious, or at least non-Hindu scholars, not all, not uniformly, but many date the Bhagavad Gita to like 600 BC.
Wow.
So I always tell Protestants, it's like, is it that hard to imagine that the same would be true for Christian traditions?
Right.
Like, like you're perfectly willing to, if you're like a Protestant scholar, right? You're perfectly willing to give that to the Hindus, the pagans, but you utterly refuse to give it to us.
Right.
You're like, I swear, it's like it it irritates me to no end because it's like like if you are going to make an argument not only for the authority of the faith as a whole, but for the authority of Scripture, for the authority of the canon, right? Wouldn't you want to defend tradition as much as possible?
Right.
Tradition and continuity is what gives is what adds to our credibility.
Exactly.
It's like, uh, like I said, even though there's still a lot of problematic stuff, at least um at least Lutherans and to some degree high church Calvinists and to a much larger degree Anglicans have a respect for tradition in
Right.
terms of continuity, and at least they attempt to trace their doctrines, however unsuccessfully, to the early church. They try to show that it's there. But low
Right.
church Protestants um, are like, yeah, what we believe is out of continuity with the early church. But you know what? The early church was wrong, and we're right.
Right. Which that is basically what Dr. James White says is like, well, it's funny because Dr. James White tries to do both. Like Dr. James White will try to show sola scriptura in the early church and will
Mhm.
try to make these like bizarre arguments that they believed in justification by faith alone somehow and that they believed all this Protestant stuff, which is weird because he'll admit that tons of early Christians didn't, but then he'll be like, well, but this random guy did, so therefore it must be true. But what's really weird is that then he'll turn around, and if you challenge him with anything that they believed that he doesn't believe, he just says, oh, yeah, they were wrong. So it's like, why did you go through all that effort to show that the early church taught your doctrines in the first place if you don't think it matters what they taught. It's just a
Yeah.
very odd methodology to me.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay. Go ahead and play
Council
it.
just happened to reference Dionysius. As we've seen, its whole history of icon veneration is based on demonstrable misquotations and provable forgeries. Rome and the East have largely stopped appealing to Dionysius to prove the legitimacy of their mystical hierarchy, but they insist Ignatius's writings really are genuine. Those claims received help in the 1640s, when Archbishop Usher of the Church of Ireland discovered 2 Latin manuscripts that read like those quoted by Eusebius. Greek manuscripts were also soon found that supported these shorter readings. Many of the obvious anachronisms like Basilides and Theodotus were missing, so Usher announced the pure text of the original had now been rediscovered. Even though all the existing collections included more than the 7 letters, Catholics and Anglicans quietly dropped the 6 not mentioned by Eusebius, and the longer versions of the 7. This got rid of the more obvious problems, but it still had Ignatius claiming to receive direct divine revelations outside of Scripture, and having the
so
bishop
what?
residing in the place of God.
Yes?
Many Protestants argued even this 7 shorter letter recension was clearly anachronistic. In the first
So it's anachronistic because we don't like what it says.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't want it to say that, therefore it's
And the
anachronistic.
dating of Ignatius' letters to the late first or early second century, that's not a Catholic and Orthodox thing exclusively. Secular scholars, based on language and based on
Right.
discussion themes, date it to the early second century,
Yeah.
like
No,
the
it's true. The
this century.
Yeah, I don't know why he thinks this is a strong argument for him, but I just love so much that I just love so much that he's like, it says that it says these things that I don't believe. Therefore, it's obviously a forgery and it's obviously like so if it has doctrines that I don't believe, that is so convenient. It says that the episcopacy is in the place of God. Well, I don't want to believe that, so therefore it's anachronistic. Like it's so
Yeah.
lame. Oh my goodness. That was
Yeah, it's one hell of a logical Jedi mind trick. It's like here's this text that uh, seems to be a very very early attestation for this thing that the Catholics and Orthodox believe. Well, but because it's you know because it's something that I believe came later. This text can't possibly be early because it talks
right.
about this that I'm assuming is later. Like,
Right, exactly. It's total circular reasoning. Oh my goodness. And I love this too because that's exactly what I said earlier. I was like, man, this guy, he does this and then this is exactly what he's doing now. He just said it outright. Like that's oh my goodness. I'm not gonna
mhm.
lie, man. Like this dude is I know he doesn't mean to be, but like he is really funny.
wait, wait the
Like
wait
I'll
till you
give credit where credit's due. He's cracking me up.
wait till you see the failure of Eastern Orthodoxy documentary he did.
Oh yeah, that's gonna. Uh, that one. That one might not crack me up. That one might upset me, but
Yeah,
um,
I think it just might, man. Like, I honestly, I think it's 50-50. It based on your reaction to this video so far, it could go either way.
all right. So Acts 120, his bishopric let another take. Let's see how this guy butchers that interpretation.
chapter of Acts, Matthias was appointed to fill Judas's bishopric, but Peter addresses the elders of the church as a fellow elder. It's
And
argued this is because all bishops are elders, but not all elders are bishops. The problem with that claim is that Paul instructed Titus to appoint multiple presbyters or elders in every city, and only gave him
And
the qualifications for an episkopos or bishop. In
and
1 Timothy, he only gives qualifications for bishops and deacons. This interchangeability of elder and bishop is made even clearer in Acts chapter 20.
He sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church. Take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers.
Presbyteros, or elder, described who these men were, and episkopos, or overseer, described their function. We see the terms
well, an episcopos is just an elder above the elders. Like, so does
It,
your church not have a senior pastor then? Like, it this is the thing, is like this is not even how Protestants actually function. Even Protestants don't function as like totally all of the elders are just the same thing. You have a head elder whose job is to be in charge of the other elder. Ostensibly, that's his job. I mean,
yeah,
I suppose maybe
yeah. I mean,
anyway.
like don't even Presbyterians have uh like a head presbyter that the other guys report to or something to some
Yes,
degree. There's your bishop.
exactly. So,
like it's literally just a bishop that the other bishops report to.
exactly.
And that's the most basic definition of a presbyter.
Right.
The everything else just evolved out of necessity as the church grew.
Right.
So like the
Um,
the core tenets of what it is to be a episkopos or bishop is is basically just the other elders report to you. You have the authority to discipline other elders, which is found in the New Testament. You can appoint elders, which is a charge that Paul gave to Titus
right.
and Timothy. Um, you give them the lay you do the laying on of hands. That's really it. Like that's all. When we say bishop, that's all we mean. Now, if
Right.
you're gonna point out all these other things, uh a priest can only set up a uh, uh, a priest can only like set up a church after sort of getting the permission of their bishop, or they can only do this with the permission of their bishop. Yeah, that's kind of out of necessity, so that proper order is maintained, uh,
Exactly.
so that you don't have people just sort of going off and starting unauthorized churches and stuff.
Exactly.
Like it works that way in any other organization. You gotta go up the chain of command.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
I, I don't know why it's so hard for these guys to, because like you said, to some degree, even in Presbyterian like jurisdictions, there's a chain of command. It might not be as like clearly defined, but it's there.
Right. Exactly. Um, anyway, on that note, I do have to get going.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
remember where we stopped.
appreciate No, no, I appreciate you. I appreciate
Yeah.
our viewers, and I look forward to many, many more discussions as we get through this. Let me write down the timestamp here.
Yeah.
Um and I know we already addressed the idea of the bishop and the episcopate and all that. So I don't feel the need to really add anything to that. But just, I don't know, just I'm glad we're going through this. Let's keep up the good work, and thank you guys for watching. Um, I I pray that all of you would leave Calvinism and be freed indeed by the love of our Lord Jesus Christ. If you want that, please feel free to attend your local Orthodox divine liturgy. God bless.
Hallelujah.